What's up, DFS Army? Cash Cake coming at you here. 2-game NFL Monday slate, man. Starts at 5 o'clock Eastern time, which is fantastic. It's great getting the early start times, especially for us East Coasters. Don't have to stay up so late. But, man, 2 games. It's going to be a lot of fun. I prefer these over the showdowns. The showdowns are okay. I always feel like they're more of a money grab for the sites. The 2-gamers are a lot more fun to get into. I'm going to focus more on Fanduel because of the contest selection that they have tonight. The DraftKings Millie Makers, I think $15 entry to get into it. Yeah, $15 to get into it for a millie up top. But I'm going to focus on Fanduel. I like their structure a little bit better than how top heavy that is, and they don't really have anything else that I like because they want to focus more on that contest, which I get. What's up, King's Uppers Land? What's up, man? So we're going to focus on playing more on Fanduel here. And I'll go through the domination station over here at DFS Army. Again, if you're not a member, head on over there. Use promo code CashCake. Sign up, save 20% off. You can jump in on this domination station and use kind of some of the things that I'm doing to attack this thing. I'm going to throw 150 lineups in tonight. We got 2 great games, man. KC at the Bills. KC coming off that loss against Vegas, and then get to see Andy Dalton led Dallas Cowboys, as the nightcap against the Cardinals here. So should be a lot of fun. There's a lot of ways you can go with this 2-game slate. There's some slates like the late slate for the yesterday. There was a 2-gamer for late. It was fantastic because you could just lock in 3 running backs, both Joneses and Gaskin, and it got you. They were still 60-70%. You lock them in, you got over. I don't know if there's any spots here, and that's what makes this slate even more interesting for a 2-gamer because there's a lot of ways you can go. You can make a case for every quarterback at their price. Running back's kind of thin, but with the Arizona situation, is it going to be Edmonds? Is it going to be Drake? There's only really, a CEH, is Solaire going to actually do some things, with Bell coming in next week? So there's a lot of different ways to go. But again, let's go over here at FanDuel. Again, this is a domination station if you're not a part of DFS Army. We're going to do a FanDuel NFL, drop down to the Monday night 2-gamer, and then setting it up. I kind of blew this up a little bit so you can kind of see this a lot better. Sometimes when we do some videos, it's so small that it doesn't really do you any good because you can't really see the setup. So I made this a lot bigger, so it's a little harder for me to go through the players, but I think it's a lot easier for you to see it. And if you got any questions as we go through this, man, please hit me up. Ask any questions as we go through this. But this is what I'm going to use to set this up. And the 2-gamer, I don't get too crazy into the rules and all that stuff. There's so many funky ways that can happen in the 2-gamer, kind of like showdowns, where I'm not trying to get, okay, let me use our correlation stacking where I need to have, a game stack here and this. You can do that for sure, but when I make 150 lineups, I don't really get too into it. So that's kind of how I get into it here. But I set it up. I always set up in tournament mode here. Use the DFS Army projections. I leave it at 1 unique, even if I do 150 lineups in a 2-gamer. You can go up to 2 or 3 if you want to. I prefer to leave it at 1. The big thing here, though, is make sure you use players against your defense. There's so many people who forget this step or just don't do it, and it really puts you at a disadvantage because generally the winning lineup's going to have at least a couple players from their defense because, with defenses you're just looking for turnovers or sacks or whatnot. So, you can set it at 3. I don't mind setting it at 4 because I really don't give a damn, whatever it spits out, and especially a slate like this where we have studs all over the place. To fit them in, you're going to have to take a couple guys against your defense. Then always move it to server mode just because it moves a little faster. But with that, I'm going to come down here and talk about, let's go position by position. Like right now our player pool is 99 players. We'll cut that down for sure, especially at the running back position. But a quarterback here, man, you can make a case for every one of these guys, man. That's what makes this slate really interesting. Patrick Mahomes, up there at 9K on FanDuel. Allen's at 8,600. Kyler Murray at 8,400. All these guys can put up 30 burgers, man, in a hurry. So I'm going to want a little bit of everybody here for quarterbacks. There's some slates where I can just hone in on one or two quarterbacks and get rid of a couple guys, and it does help. But in this situation where we have 4 quarterbacks that can get it done, yes, Andy Dalton, he's $7K, but he can get it done with those weapons. Yeah, Wegner, I'll do some ownership projections here in a little bit. I want to get this video out, but I'll definitely have some ownership in there a little bit later. I think I put him in there for the showdown, but for the 2-gamer, I definitely plan on having him in there. So look out for them in the next hour or two when I get off here. But, they might run the ball a little bit more Zeke now that Dalton's at the helm, but he still's got Cooper. He's still got Lamb. He's got Schultz. He has all of his weapons. So even at 7K, I want a little bit of every one of these guys. And because we have such high spend-ups like Zeke and Kelsey and Nuke and all these guys, you're going to want some Andy Dalton. So I'm not going to touch any of the exposures to begin with just because I want to see what it gives me. And sometimes what I'll do here is I'll just run this thing. I'm sorry, I did 3 lineups. Do 150. I'll run this thing raw, 150 lineups, just to see what it's gonna produce. And then I'll go in and maybe adjust some things and get rid of some trash that we don't need. But at the quarterback position on this 2-gamer, I'm literally going to have a little bit of everybody. I think every one of them could be in the optimal lineup. Not like yesterday's 2-gamer where you could just take Flacco and hit the X button and you didn't want to play him. But this 2-gamer, we got a bunch of Murray and Dalton. It's leaving off the other 2 because of price. And again, because of that, running this raw, when you've got Edward Solaire and Zeke both expensive, it's hard to fit in those expensive quarterbacks. It's giving us a lot of Schultz again, some Kelsey, Croft. You're going to want some of these guys too, these tight ends for the Cardinals, because they're cheap. It allows you to pay up at other positions. And even on these 2-gamers, when you have studs that can go off for 35 or 40, I have no problem putting in a 4K tight end that's going to get me a 0, because sometimes that'll be in the winning lineup. So tight end is kind of can win you or make or break the slate sometimes. So when we go around and mess with tight end, you're probably going to want to have a little bit of everybody there. Wide receivers giving us a bunch of Lamb, Nuke, Cooper, some Hardman, some Robinson. I think tight end is going to be where it's going to win it, which is kind of crazy. And the defense is giving us very little Bills, bunch of Cowboys, again, because they're cheap. They're $3,700. And that's where you don't mind putting guys against your defense. Like if you see here, we got the Cowboys defense, but then we have 3 guys against them with Murray, Drake, and Hopkins. So I don't mind, again, running that defense against 4 players because it's not a big deal. So let's go back up. And again, like I said, quarterbacks, I think what I want to be at, Andy Dalton, I think I'm going to put 25% at all of them right now and then kind of look at my lineups. I don't have a real lean right now. And then again, this is just initial setup. I'll go through a little bit more. Running back, I think this is a decision that you could make. It's tough because Zeke is $9,500. They didn't mess around with his price tag. And because there's other guys on the slate that can go off, it sucks because I feel like Elliott has, of course, if you're playing cash games, you lock in Elliott. If you're playing single entry, I think you lock in Elliott. But there's so many question marks with this. With Zach Moss coming back, it does take the shine off of Singletary a little bit. He had a bad game. But I think he's still playable at 6,300. And then you get on the Arizona side, with Chase Edmonds and Drake. They're kind of splitting things a little bit. Drake's been a disappointment so far. The problem with Murray is he tucks the ball and runs a ton. So there's ways they can get there. I don't want any Darrell Williams. I don't want any Washington on this slate. You got to play at least 2 running backs. Maybe I'll leave a little bit of Pollard in, but I think it's going to be the Zeke show. I don't think Pollard's going to get there, but I'll leave him in. But I can't really lock in any of these guys. Edward Solaire, again, he should get there, but at 7,400, maybe I want to go a little less on him. So a way to do this real quick, if you don't like the projection on him, if you want a little less without adjusting it, you can come down here and just give him minus 15%, and it'll drop his projection a little bit. I don't know. I feel like it's tough. It's tough to fit in Elliott. That's why I think these guys are going to pop more on FanDuel. And the thing is I don't know if I want to make a rule if I play Edmonds not to play Drake. If this was a main slate, I would make that rule if I had Drake not to play Edmonds. But on the 2-game slate, maybe they can both get in the box and Elliott doesn't get there. But it's a tricky slate at running back on FanDuel. Wide receiver, again, and the reason why it's hard to just lock in Zeke at this is you got Nuke up here at 8,800. Tyreek Hill can take the top off and hit a couple touchdowns for 8,300. Cooper can definitely get there. Diggs, like you have expensive guys that if these guys go off for 20 or 30 points and Zeke only puts up 20, you can't lock them in because maybe the 6K running backs put up just enough around 10 to 12 where those are the guys that you needed in for the optimal lineup. So it makes it tricky on this 2-gamer that you don't want to – I don't think you want to hit a lock button on any of the guys because of just the points. Again, if you're playing cash games, just lock in Zeke at your running back position. But in tournaments, I don't think I need to be all in on a guy like that when we have other options. We've seen how bad the secondary is with the Cowboys. And, Nuke could actually just go off here and he could easily outscore him. Would you set a rule for Moss and Singletary, knowing they aren't as much as a run team? I think you could. Uppers, I don't think you have to, but I think you definitely could. I think they're cheap enough here on FanDuel that, I guess Singletary 6,300 and Moss is 5,300. I guess you could set a rule. So if you're going to go set a rule, come down, where are we at here? Set a rule where I don't want Singletary. Where are we at? That's just no more than one of, where's he at? Moss. Where is Moss at? Zach Moss. I don't think you have to. I don't like setting rules in these 2-gamers at all. But you can definitely set a rule. With no more of one of Moss. And I don't like setting rules like this, but you can definitely set a rule with no more than one of Moss or Singletary. I just don't think that you have to, at their price. Now, if they were both like 7,500 or 7,800, maybe that set a rule. I get more setting rules when it comes to the main slates. These damn 2-gamers and showdowns can get so funky that I don't even set stacking rules. I think my top lineup, had yesterday in the 2-gamer had Fitzpatrick at quarterback because he scored more, but it had more pass catchers from Tampa Bay with Gronk and Godwin, and only one pass catcher from I don't even know if there's a pass catcher. There might not even have been one in my top lineup from Miami. So there's funky things that can happen where I just don't think, if you get so set in rules, usually you go back on these smaller slates, you go back and you just kind of like question why you did it. I'm more concerned about setting max players against my defense because not enough people do that. So that's what I'm really focused on. Let's go back here and set some of these in wide receiver though. Let's go down here. Noah Brown, he's not going to be in our lineup here. I don't want none of him. No problem running some McKenzie and Davis here from Buffalo with Beasley. John Brown is due back, so that is going to – I think he's due back. Yeah, he should play this game, so that is going to hurt McKenzie a bunch and Gabriel. Maybe you want to take those guys out. I don't think they're going to filter in too much because the projection kind of takes that into account. I think Brown back definitely helps Diggs a little bit because they can't just focus on him. But it does hurt these secondary wide receivers for the Browns. So like Gabriel Davis and McKenzie, it does hurt them. So getting these guys back for Buffalo, it's not like last week where those guys were definitely more in play, and in that showdown where we played them a little bit more. So I would want to be way less on McKenzie and Davis because of that, because Brown is due back, and that's where I want to be focusing on. And you might be landing on this if you weren't high on Zeke. A lot of your Zeke lineups are probably going to be sitting on this Diggs, Lamb. The one thing we got to look at, Watkins is out, so this is going to be a big boost for Tyreek Hill, of course, but then Harden and Robinson. So if you're looking in this range for these cheap guys, said John Brown did miss Saturday. What did I read last? I think I read before I came on here. Let me look. Thought he said he was going to suit up, but he said Saturday. Let me read. Because it's important. If he is out, then it boosts those guys. But let me see here. Let me see the last thing I saw. I thought he was probable, yeah. So John Brown is probable. So I think he's going to play, Kanger. But yeah, we definitely have to make sure of that. I mean, it's if he's out, then those other guys are going to be play. Like Gabriel and McKenzie will be great plays, and we need that salary saver. But if he's going to if he's going to be out, I mean, if he's going to be in, it just kills that value completely. And you're going to be want to look at more of the value of Robinson, Pringle, and Hardman. And this is another reason why I don't like to stack rules on this, because we know Mahomes is going to throw it to everybody. One guy could go off, or he could throw 4 touchdowns to 4 different people. And so it's a big boost to Hardman. The most, I like him the most. But then Robinson and Pringle could get there. So yeah, the Brown does, change things up. So just make sure he's in there. We'll have this domination station updated when we get to that point. But it's a big boost for them. And then we look at Larry Fitzgerald 4,900 is crazy price, but I think I want to be on KC cheap guys the most. With Watkins out, I think it boosts them the most. So maybe I want to make sure I get more Robinson in and I boost his projection. Maybe I want to make sure I get in more Hardman, boost his projection up a little bit. But yeah, we'll have to look on the Brown thing. And then tight ends, again, like I said, you're going to want some of these guys that are down to even 4K. Even if it's Darrell Daniels, Arnold, I don't care about the projection here, because you're forced to play a tight end, right? And you got to play one. And when you're on a slate where you have so many studs, you might get an optimal lineup with a Daniels in it that he got 1 catch or he got a 0 and still be in the winning lineup. Now, if Kelsey goes off and puts up 3 touchdowns and 30 points, well, then that scenario didn't work out. But if Hill goes off and Nuke goes off and Zeke goes off and all these guys go off massively, it might just be a punt spot. Croft is going to be your highest owned cheap guy by far. With no knocks, Croft is going to be extremely high owned. But I have no problem sprinkling any of these turd tight ends down here with Arnold, Bell, Smith, Daniels. I have no problem playing any of them. Not on Fanduel, Kanger. I wouldn't play double tight end on Fanduel. Not at all. Unless you're the only way I think you would even get away with that is if you played Kelsey would have to be one of them. It'd be Kelsey and then a turd tight end and flex. So let me look at one of these lines. If we put Kelsey in there and say I'm just throwing Daniels because he's 4K. And I'm going to do 10 lineups just to see what they look like real quick. Yeah, I haven't looked on the DK slate because I'm just focusing on FanDuel. So it's not a strong tight end position, so I wouldn't. I'm just specifically talking on FanDuel where you might need that savings if the studs just completely go off. But it's like, okay, so I locked him in here, right? I locked Kelsey in here, and then I locked Daniels just to show you that he's in the flex. And it lets you get Murray, Zeke, Nuke, and then you got some decent, Lamb, Beasley. You do have, see, now if this one's got Andy Dalton in it, and because you paid down to Daniels and because you wanted Kelsey as well, it gives you a ton of studs as well. So I think it's plausible. Is it probably going to hit? No. But for this to hit, for this lineup to hit with this double tight end crap, you need those studs to put up massive points. Because if they just if these games are not like massively high scoring games, and these guys aren't putting up 25, 30, 40 points, then that punt tight end is not going to work. You're going to look more of your mid-range plays. So I'm just saying that I wouldn't hate it, on a slate like this where you got guys that can just go completely off and they're priced up. Because if you look at if a guy gets you a 0 and Kelsey gets you 40 points, something massive like that, and those other guys go off, well, if you had two mid-range guys only get you 30 combined that have the same price as a 4K guy and Kelsey who puts up 35 or 40, then that's a scenario that would pay off. So again, I'm just saying, like, I don't mind mixing and matching these tight ends just because I've seen crazier things happen. So that's kind of where I leave it. But I want to see just putting the percentages at tight end, the min percentage, at quarterback. Again, if you see me doing things on here, this is how I set up the domination station. You'll see Geek do it differently. There's no right or wrong way. It's what works for you. So keep that in mind. And like I said, like Kanger asked earlier, I'll have the ownership projections in here a little bit later. After I get done doing this video, I'll go and create some and put them in here for this 2-gamer. But you should see them in there for the early showdown slate. I think I put them in there earlier, so you should see them in there. But yeah, so here I put a min on all my quarterbacks. You don't want to put a min on everybody, but if I wanted to get that range of min on my quarterbacks, I can force them in there. And that's giving me 84% Zeke. That's too much Drake for me. And say I don't want to mess with this projection, but I don't want that much of him. Maybe I want to put him down to 30. I'm not getting, I moved the Edward Solaire down because at his price, maybe, maybe Diggs goes off and scores way more than him. And if I have, that's just too much Drake for me. So I'll put a max 30% on him. Look at the wide receivers. Gives us a ton of Nuke, a ton of Lamb. I have no problem with that. It gave us more Hardman because Watkins out, and we adjusted his projection a little bit of Diggs. Cooper, probably want a little bit more Robinson. Maybe I'll do a minimum 15% on Robinson. Again, Brown, we have to watch this. This projection could change depending on if he's in or out. But if he's in, I have no problem playing some Brown. Maybe that's a little bit too low. I'll run 15 on him. And now I don't want to make too many more adjustments. I'll come in here and run this again. Because if you make a bunch of adjustments on the min percentages, it will cause it just not to work. It just be like you've made too many adjustments to the optimizer. Well, it's not going to spit out lineups. So remember that when you see me making these min percentage changes, I'm not doing it on every player. I'm just picking out a few players. So when you go back in here, you'll see 15%, 18% on John. It moved those guys up a little bit. Brought Beasley down. But it's extremely high on Nuke, which I have no problem with. Extremely high on Lamb. I don't mind going 100% on players if you feel like that is the case. If you want to come back in here and go to, say, all right, let me go to all players, and I want to make sure I don't have more than 70% of one player. Just do that and then rerun it and see what it'll spit out. But when you're making adjustments in the optimizer, don't make a bunch at once and then run it and then wonder why it's not going to run. You just got to do a little bit at a time, and it will change things up for you and make sure that it functions. Because if you make an adjustment and it doesn't work, go back and take that adjustment out, and it'll go back and start working again. It means you made too many adjustments to it where the math's just not going to work out. So Now we got 70% Hardman, which is too much. But again, this is where you're messing around. Because it's 5,400, no Watkins, I do like him a lot. Again, Kraft is going to be extremely popular just in builds in general because it lets you get to Zeke. Still lets you run a decent wide receiver pool. And then you can get Nuke and Zeke in there. Lineups like this are very interesting. And again, if you look at this, we have 3 Cardinals against that defense, why it's important. Oh, yeah, you're right. There was no Hill in that. So you come back to Hill, right? His projection is – the problem is, this is the problem. His projection is at 14, and we got Nuke's 7 more higher, and he's only 500 higher. So there's 2 ways to do it. Again, you can come in here and just adjust it that way and see if it'll give you a little bit. That's the easiest way to try it real quick. The other thing is, if I like that projection and I think he's not going to go higher than that, maybe you come in here and you're like, okay, I want 25% of him real quick. What this does is the problem I have of adjusting everyone's projections is if I just boost everyone's projections up that's low and it forces them into my lineups, well, now he's going to hit all the optimal top lineups that have good projections, and it's going to force kind of a turd into a good lineup, and I don't want to do that. I would rather do this where maybe Hill's on some of the lineups that I have towards the bottom. But again, I made one change. I'll go back here and run it. Don't make a bunch. I'll come back through here. And that's the thing where I don't like about boosting everyone's projection and then taking the max percentage and then adjusting it. Because when I'm doing that, if I put a 12 or 13 projection on Larry Fitzgerald and then say, okay, that gets me more of him, but I only want to max it at 10%. Well, now I force Larry Fitzgerald into every one of my top lineups because he has one of the highest point per dollar, and the optimizer is going to do that. So I don't like to force guys' projection in there just to get more of them. If I feel like I need more of them, I would rather just put a min on a few guys because then he's gonna be in toward the bottom of the lineups that I'm making. And again, this is just for a 2-gamer. I just don't like to adjust their projections like that. So come back in here. Now I'm sitting at 25% Hill. And you see he's not going to be hitting these top lineups that are projected. So he's going to be hitting towards more of the bottom lineups because I didn't boost his projection up. If I would have done it, we go down here. We get towards the bottom, we'll probably see more of the Hill lineups. Kelsey, Hardman. See, there's some Hill down here. There's some Hill. There's Hill. See what I mean? They're really not towards the top, and that's why I disagree with adjusting everyone projection up like that, where I would rather put a min on somebody because it's not going to put a guy that I don't want towards my top unless I think he's projected wrong. If I'm like, okay, I see this game script going a certain way, right? And so I let me take this 25% off of Hill, right? But I say, no, I think he's going to get 2 touchdowns. Let me put him at 22. And this is me adjusting it some people just put a lot of high projection on him. Well, then when I hit optimize, and as it spits out the 150 for me, now look where Hill's at. And even if I wanted 25% on him, I guess I should have done that real quick. I could so a lot of people like to put a higher projection on Hill and then put 25%, right? But now you see Hill is in all my top lineups, right? And I don't want it, and that might be fine for certain folks, but it's not fine for me when I get to, some of these turds, when I get to a Robinson, or maybe I don't have enough Gallup, and I want more 9%. I don't want to adjust his projection because I don't want him to be up towards the top of my lineups. It puts bad players that I don't want in a good projected lineup, but I want to force him into some of them. And maybe it's my lower own lineups towards the bottom. So just keep that in mind. That's kind of how my thought process on it. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. That's just how my mind works when it comes to putting these lineups together and adjusting the projections. So I don't care to do it that way. I would much rather, again, if I don't agree with the projection, I might give them a little bit more, but I don't like to just boost up their projection and then set a max on it. just because it's forcing him into lineups that doesn't make it an optimal lineup that I like. So, if you see a certain game script going off, by all means, I'll adjust a guy's projection, and I want him more in the top optimal lineups, but it's not for every player. It's specific players that I want that. So that's kind of how I'm going about it. Again, this slate is very if you were going to make any rules, I guess at all, I don't like making them on 2 gamers because there's avenues these guys could both score. But I guess you could look at maybe an Edmonds and a Drake. I only want one of them. I'm not going to personally do that, but that would be one. Or like we talked about Singletary and Moss, maybe you only want one of them. Maybe only one of those guys go off. They're just cheap running backs where you have to run 2 of them. And if Zeke doesn't have a monster game, maybe 2 of them get you to that mid-range 10 to 12 points each. And they're both in the optimal lineup. There's paths for that, I see. So it's not – it's a really tough 2-game slate, but a really fun one. So if you're looking at that and you're making your lineups, just don't forget about the cheap tight ends. Like I said, don't forget about your Daniels and Arnolds and these guys down here. I wouldn't forget about these guys. Have a little bit of them in there because they could, even if they catch 1 pass for a touchdown or if they get you 3 points, they could be in the optimal lineup. But the number one key I always say that not enough people do is make sure you run players against your defense, man. So I'll be in there answering questions in our Slack chat. I'm going to get off here and start working on the 2-game ownership projections, and I will post them up shortly. So hopefully that'll give us a better idea of where the chalk is going to be. And if you're not part of DFS Army, head on over there. Sign up, dfsarmy.com. Promo code CashCake. Save yourself 20%. I will be in our chat answering questions for you guys. And hopefully we will be making some money tonight. So with that, appreciate you guys hanging out with me. And I'll see you on the flip side. Deuces.